So you're wanting to play the most powerful character in Dungeons and Dragons, huh? Well, hey, at least you're upfront about it. But as it turns out, this character can also be quite a bit of fun to play. So you're in some luck. Because behind today's secret door, the Archfey Warlock second test drive. So behind today's secret door, the Archfey Warlock second test drive. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. All right, well, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo and Doug for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So, as with all test drives, please do check the pinned comment. I don't think that because of the nature of this one, it's going to be a little quicker. We're only going to go from levels 1 to 5, and for good reason, as you'll see. But I don't think that there will be too much need to worry about a lot of mistakes here. But hey, you never know. I've made mistakes in this last 6 months that I never thought I would make, so who knows? But if there are any, or any omissions, or things that didn't make the edit, anything like that, it'll be in the pinned comment. Okay, so this is the second crack at the Archfey, and I'm perfectly happy with what I did in the Archfey previously, except that I discovered something rather shocking. And that is that one spell in particular that I looked at as simply a fine spell, like a C plus, maybe kind of a spell. And I mean that in terms of an A through F scale, not the S kind of internet grading scale. I don't know why we do that, but people do it. So I'm just stuck on the grading scale I grew up with. So when I say C scale, you could translate that into B scale, I guess. But in any case, I was wrong about that particular spell. It is a much more powerful spell because I thought that it was a concentration spell, and it is not. And that particular spell, and then something else that I've discovered recently, has changed the nature of how you might play the Archfey, so I wanted to include it here. And yes, I do think that the Archfey Warlock could be, theoretically, the most powerful character in D&D. So when I say that it is potentially the most powerful character in Dungeons and Dragons, what I mean by that is a character that can end encounters by themselves, handle the entire encounter more or less by themselves and end it. Almost any given encounter, that to me is the definition of power. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the best healers, the best controller per se, although this one's power does come through control, or the best in utility or whatever, or damage or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply defining power, as I would say with a controlling wizard. The kind of encounter-ending effects that a wizard can get through, say, Wall of Force or Force Cage is something this character can pull off at a much earlier level. Now, it's not going to be 100%, of course, but it's shockingly reliable. And we'll get there. What the goal of this test drive is to take you from levels 1 through 5, because this whole thing hits at level 5. But if you're going to play a character like this, I don't want you to be completely lost in the woods as to how to get the most out of the character from levels 1 to 4, because you have to get to 5. And as it turns out, of course, any warlock is going to be potentially quite dominant in levels 1 through 4 if they do the right thing. So that's kind of my goal from levels 1 through 4, is to show you how to get the most out of this character until you get to level 5. Now, I'm going to warn you folks. What happens at level 5 is as advertised. And it may end up ruining the game. I fully suspect that if you were to pull this trick off more than, say, 3 times, There are going to be a lot of game masters out there that are going to cry foul, going to cry havoc, and they might ban it or whatever. I'm not saying that they ban the Archfey, but that they would ban this spell combination or neuter it in some way. And that's up to them. That's up to how a DM is going to handle this. I personally don't have a great answer for Dungeon Masters, unfortunately, just yet, as to how I would deal with this. But since I came across this idea, and it came by itself organically out of the work that I was doing, I wasn't looking for this kind of combo. So I want to be very clear here, because when you're talking about stuff that's this powerful, the realistic response from a DM or a GM or whatever, in whatever game you're playing, every encounter going the same way, ending the same way, is going to be kind of boring and tedious after a while. And frankly, as a player, I would get kind of bored too. So right from the start, I just want to plant in your mind that once you see how good this thing is, I'm going to be showing you how you can get a lot of value out of doing half of the combo and still being pretty dominant, and the DM won't say anything really at all about it. And then you can save the full combo for when you really, really, really need it. Or when it's just an annoying time to have to fight. If there's a big surprise fight and you just want to get rid of it, the combo thing can be a great way of dismissing that combat almost out of hand. Being crazy powerful is a lot of fun, but this will actually trivialize the game to a great degree. And there is the other factor here, and that is your fellow players. Nobody likes to feel like they're irrelevant, and it can kind of feel like that if you pull this combo off way too many times. So there's going to be problems here, but I think intellectually it's just so interesting that I have to go over it with all of you folks. Okay, so a test drive is exactly what it sounds like. It's your chance to see how a character is going to play. I'm going to be taking you just from levels 1 through 5. And while I'm going to be giving you what I consider to be optimal choices along the way, it's going to be a little bit more on the guide-ish side. Test drive is build-ish and guide-ish. This one's going to be a little bit more on the guide-ish side, but there's going to be an awful lot of do this to get to this kind of an idea. But then there's a lot of other things that aren't going to really matter all that much. So with all that in mind, let's start with your feat. Now the feat here is absolutely a must-take, is alert. But when you are playing a character that is going to be a controller, alert is almost a must-take. Now for race, I'm going to give you basically 3 good, solid choices here. It doesn't really matter all that much. These are just the ones that I think are going to be the most optimum. So you have your 2 elves in the high elf or the wood elf. The wood elf's going to give you 5 extra feet of movement, and that's nice. You're going to get trance with both of them. The wood elf's going to give you long strider. That's a nice spell. The high elf is going to give you a wandering wizard cantrip that you can renew at any given long rest, which is very, very nice. And then, of course, you're going to get detect magic. And then at 5th level, you're going to get at 3rd level. And then at 5th level, you would get misty step, which, of course, this character is going to have in abundance. And, of course, you get trance. Now, the big reason why you might want to play an elf is because there are so many tricks that you can pull off as an elf warlock that just having access to trance as a warlock is reason enough. So if you really had your heart set on playing a drow elf, for example, that's fine. It'll work just fine. The other choice would be the Cloud Giant Goliath. The Cloud Giant Goliath is also going to give you 5 extra feet of movement. It's kind of like the combination of the high elf and the wood elf in a way, because you're getting 5 extra feet of movement like the wood elf, and you're getting something like Misty Step. It's not a spell though, so it's very, very strong in that sense, but it's a bonus action 30-foot teleport. But you don't get trance. So depending on how often you want to be using trance tricks with pact magic will determine. I think the Cloud Giant would be a very safe pick. In general, it's going to get the best of both worlds, except that it's not getting the big get. The real reason you want to be an elf is for trance. Now, also playing an elf from a thematic standpoint obviously has a lot of intrinsic value, but Cloud Giant as a trickery kind of creature is certainly going to be thematically very valuable as well. But none of these lead to any particular optimal chain or are required, so it's really just a question of taste and what you value. So as far as stats go, I would definitely buy a 15 into charisma. I would buy a 14 into dex, a 13 into con, and then a 12 into wisdom. And then you're going to dump one of either your strength or your intelligence and put a 10 in the other one. The +2 is obviously going to go into charisma. The +1 will go into your 13. And then you'll put your +1 into your 13. So you'll have a 14 dex, a 14 con, and a 17 charisma, and a 12 wisdom. At first level, you're going to get Pact Magic and you're going to get an Eldritch Invocation. With the Invocation, we're definitely going to go with Pact of the Chain. And in these first 4 levels, Pact of the Chain is going to be, and you're going to go largely with the Pseudo-Dragon. And the Pseudo-Dragon is going to do an amazing job of mopping up the field for you, especially at these early levels. For those of you that aren't aware, the Pseudo-Dragon's Sting is not an attack. Therefore, it can be used by the familiar without having to have any kind of sacrifice of an action by Pact of the Chain. In fact, because it isn't an attack, you can't have it attack with the Sting if you sacrifice an attack or give it the action to attack if you were to take investment at the Chainmaster. It's an ability, but it's an extremely strong ability. And of course, it's been eroded rather infamously. Now, on a failed save, the target is unconscious. That's assuming that the target can be poisoned, of course. But that is an extremely powerful thing to be able to do round after round after round after round. So your playstyle from levels 1 through 4 is largely about simply, that's going to be your heavy hitter is going to be the Pseudo-Dragon. You should be trying to either just simply do other things that are going to be amplifying that or in support of the Pseudo, protecting the Pseudo or taking a spell like Bane so that the chances of the opponents making their saving throw is reduced. So that's certainly a style of play that you can approach it from. Now, I don't like spending an action or a spell slot on one single save or suck kind of an effect, normally speaking, but Bane does affect 3 targets. So it's very likely with Bane that 1 or 2 of them are not going to make that saving throw on any given casting of it, and therefore it can be very, very useful. And so everything that you do needs to be judged through that lens with Pact of the Chain. Taking a spell like Bane may be your best bet. Certainly taking Hex is going to be something you're going to want to think about. I would definitely take Hex if it were me. And you're going to have the option of gaining Hex at 4th level if you really want it. And therefore you could also trade it out once you get it at 4th level if you went that route. If you plan on using Bane all the time, if that's what you're going to do, then it's going to be, they're both concentration. So do you need Hex? Probably you don't. And you may just want to be able to live with that until 4th level, with it just taking Bane. But I think that there's going to be times where the Pseudo's just not going to be able to do it. There will be some kind of creature that's immune to the sleep condition or something to that effect. I think it's a very dangerous idea to just put the entire character into just simply supporting the Pseudo. I think that's a kind of a mistake. You want to have options outside of that. Tasha's has the great advantage that it upcasts nicely and that you are getting an additional target for every level, and that those targets could be at opposite sides of the map as long as they're within range. So that's where it is slightly better than Sleep, although Sleep is generally speaking a better spell than Tasha's, generally speaking, but it doesn't upcast like Tasha's does. So in general, because of that one spell slot problem, Hex is obviously going to be something you're going to want to pick because it lasts for an hour. And of course, you get that spell slot back anytime you take a short rest. So just keep all that in mind. The Pseudo is going to just do an awful lot of the work for you. You don't even need to be setting it up overly much at this point. And at level 2, we get 2 more Eldritch Invocations, and of course we get another spell slot, and that's a really big get, and we get Magical Cunning. Now, Magical Cunning is a esoteric ritual that lasts 1 minute, and it gives you, at this point, basically 1 spell slot back. Now, I assume you're going to have about 3 combats in a day, each lasting about 4 rounds, and that you'll have 1 short rest in a day. So with that in mind, with those 2 spell slots that you have now at 2nd level, you're going to have basically 5 spell slots available to you. 2 to start with, 2 from the short rest, and 1 from Magical Cunning. Now, with those 2 extra invocations, I would definitely take Eldritch Mind. That's going to give you advantage on your concentration saves, and you're going to want that. And then I would take Repelling Blast. And I would definitely have, as a cantrip, I would definitely use Eldritch Blast. I know a lot of people like the idea that you can mix and match these things off of things other than Eldritch Blast, but Eldritch Blast is still the better cantrip for a ranged character. It has more innate synergy with things like Hex and everything else, so I strongly recommend. It may seem boring and vanilla, but I would definitely take Eldritch Blast, especially if you're going to be using something like Repelling Blast, because as we get to higher level, you're going to get more shots with it. It's Repelling Blast or Agonizing Blast. I'm going to say I would take Repelling Blast here, though you will have the option again at 5th level of taking it. But you're not going to have a lot of things to be pushing anybody into or at yet. But in your party, there very well might be. So if you have a wizard in the party and once you hit 3rd level and they're casting something like web, well, then you're going to be able to push them into the web if that comes up, or anything of the sort. Anything where there is a condition on the field that you want to be pushing them towards, or off cliffs, or off ledges, or any of those kind of standard ideas with Repelling Blast. That is why I would take Repelling Blast over Agonizing Blast, but certainly at low levels, doing damage and just killing the creature is certainly going to happen very quickly, much more quickly now than it ever will later, so grabbing the damage is equally viable. Either way, you're going to have both of them probably at 5th level. Now, with Pact of the Chain, you're going to be able to toggle the Imp in whenever you really want to. It's only going to cost you a magic action. So you don't have to worry about hour-long rituals or anything like that, or hour and 10-minute long rituals. A magic action is all you need, but you do need the material component, which in this case is going to be the incense. So while toggling between the pseudo and the imp, and I bring the imp up because you're going to be using the imp later, you're going to be largely wanting to abandon the pseudo in favor of the imp for reasons you'll see later. But the imp is way better in utility than the pseudo dragon. And there's a lot of things that you can do, a lot of fun, cool things you can do with the imp. So don't forget that that is an option, even if you are primarily going with the pseudo dragon in combat right now. But to toggle like that is rather expensive. So here at 1st and 2nd level, you're going to actually be one of the more powerful characters in the group because of the pseudo dragon. Pact of the Chain is just an extremely strong invocation, and that alone is going to make you extremely, extremely powerful. But now we get to 3rd level. And with 3rd level, of course, we get the Archfey. Now, in terms of spells that we get from the Archfey, we're going to get Calm Emotions, Fairy Fire, Misty Step, Phantasmal Force, and Sleep. Now, as mentioned earlier, Sleep is going to be one of those spells that's just going to be extremely useful from a control standpoint. It is concentration, so there is that now. Misty Step is, of course, Misty Step, and we'll get to what the Archfey does with that in a second. Calm Emotions is actually a pretty decent spell when used outside of combat. So if something, a negotiation is breaking down and people are getting hot-headed or something like that, it can be a way of defusing that scenario before you actually have to start rolling for initiative. And it has other effects, but that would be the primary reason I would want to use Calm Emotions. Phantasmal Force, it's a good spell, it's not a really good spell. I would say it's fine. It's going to be hard for me to ever embrace anything that isn't the original AD&D version of Phantasmal Force, which was an amazingly cool spell. Now it's fine. It's fine. Now, in terms of spells, I just want to point something out here. That when I did an evaluation of this was in 5th edition, when I did my evaluation of the Warlocks ranked, I took a lot of heat from people, not, tons of it, but I took a fair amount of heat for ranking the Archfey as highly as I did, because everyone didn't like its ability in 5th edition, and rightfully so. Its ability in 5th edition was really lame. But it did have Sleep on its spell list, and you got it right away. And Sleep from levels 1 through 3, 4, 5-ish, depending on the DM, nuked encounters in 5th edition. So anything that has something where the first several levels you're going to have that kind of power at your disposal can't be awful, can't be unplayable, was my argument. It had to be the definition of at least being okay, which is where I ranked it. And people went, some people thought that I was a lunatic for saying that. But as it turns out, the Archfey was just as powerful as I'm going to describe to you when we get to 5th level then as it is now. And everybody missed it. But we'll get there. All right, so now at third level, we're getting Steps of the Fae, and that's going to give us the ability to cast Misty Step a number of times without expending a spell slot equal to our Charisma modifier, and we get all that back when we finish a long rest. We get Taunting Step and we get Refreshing Step, and that's very great whenever we cast Misty Step. And if you went with something like a High Elf here and you're going to get access to Misty Step at 5th level, that will still apply. Anytime you cast Misty Step, it will not apply to the Cloud Giant if you went that way, because that's not Misty Step, even though it's otherwise identical to it. But both those options are very, very fun options. I think in general, I'm going to be probably leaning on the Refreshing Step more often than not, but you have both of them at your disposal. So simply having a spell as great as Misty Step is, and it's a great spell, it's great in combat, it's great for utility, and then you get those 2 extra options whenever you cast it. Wonderful, powerful, great. At this point, that's 3 Misty Steps you're getting here at 3rd level. And of course, we get our 2nd level spells. Now, the 2 that I would strongly consider taking, and there's several that are on the list that are good, Suggestion is an amazing spell. Invisibility is an amazing spell. Mirror Image is a great spell. Now, normally I would talk up something like Spider Climb a bit, but I think with your use of Misty Step, the sheer amount of uses you're going to have of Misty Step, from a utility standpoint, you don't really need Spider Climb, I don't see, as an Archfey. You could take it, of course, it's a great spell, love it, but I don't think you necessarily need it as an Archfey. So I would be looking at those 3 spells. I would be looking at Suggestion, Invisibility, and Mirror Image. Now, you'll notice there isn't really a combat option in that group. You don't really need to have one, frankly. That's what the Pseudo-Dragon's doing for you. If you were to cast Hex at this level, Hex is going to last for 4 hours. So let's talk about the trance trick, and this can apply in many different ways to lots of different things. So if you were an elf, and you have just taken a long rest, you only have to do 4 hours with trance to complete a long rest. So let's say you're getting up at 4 in the morning when the rest of the party is going to get up at 8 in the morning, or be ready to go at 8 in the morning. You could take out a jar of beetles, pull out a beetle, cast Hex on the beetle, crush the beetle, then take a short rest, get your spell slot back, and now you have Hex running for 3 more additional hours for free. Once we get to a higher level and it's running for 8 hours, it's going to be running for 7 hours of Hex for free. And then it's going to upgrade again to the fact that it'll be running for 24 hours. So at this, even as early as 3rd level, it's really rather simple to be getting Hex running for free. And you should never turn away having something like that where you can get it for free. Then at 4th level, we get our ASI. And for our ASI, normally you're going to be thinking, I'm going to say Warcaster, but no. Why? You have Eldritch Mind. You don't need Warcaster. You're basically going to want to look at essentially 2 choices, I think, are going to be the best choices here. Is either going to be Fey Touched or Shadow Touched. Shadow Touched is going to be great if you want extra utility. You're going to pick up Invisibility as your 2nd level spell, and then you're going to get an Illusion spell or a Necromancy spell at 1st level of your choice. So even taking something like Disguise Self, if you wanted to go with the utility standpoint and you get a free casting of something like that, that's why I like Disguise Self as a spell when you're going to get a free casting of it. Disguise Self is amazing, and we'll revisit that at the very next level, whether you want to be doing that or not. So if I wanted the utility, I would be looking at something like Shadow Touched. Fey Touched obviously has the obvious thematics to it. You're going to get yet another casting of Misty Step. So this would be more of your combat option. You get a divination or an enchantment spell at 1st level, and I would probably go with Hex here, because you're going to get a free 1 hour casting of Hex, because it's going to be cast at 1st level. And of course, then if you had Hex as a spell known, you can trade that out. This is a character that isn't going to be super reliant on Hex. That's why I'm not even talking about really DPR here, because the Pseudo-Dragon's really the thing, and that's a condition effect. You're going to be doing plenty. I'm not worried about the damage numbers that you can put up, but you could certainly be wanting to be putting up reasonable damage numbers. and that's why I'm saying Hex and then thinking about Agonizing Blast are things that will help get you into the realm of at least being reasonable in your damage. So those would be the two big choices I would take, either Fey Touched or Shadow Touched for the feat here at this level. And that would put your Charisma to 18, which is going to give you yet another casting of Misty Step. And you are still doing really, really, really well. But we're about to get now to 5th level, and the world is about to end. Because at 5th level, we get our 3rd level spells, and of course we get our 3rd level spells from the Archfey. And the 2 spells we get from the Archfey are Blink and Plant Growth. Now, Plant Growth is what I was referring to earlier as the spell that I just missed because I thought that it was concentration all these years. I just thought that it was a concentration spell, all because it was the exact same story in 5th edition. Okay, so let's talk about Plant Growth first. That's really the reason we're here. Plant Growth affects a 100-foot radius sphere. Now, folks, a 100-foot radius means a 200-foot diameter. In D&D terms, in terms of squares affected, we're talking about a 40 by 40. That's 1,600. That's insanity. That's complete insanity. And it's a sphere. Anything within that area, and you can exclude as many areas as you choose in that area of effect, plants overgrow and it quarters movement. So any creature there must spend 4 feet of movement to travel 1 foot. That's all it does. It doesn't create difficult terrain. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't create any problems with sight lines, strangely enough, even though everything is so overgrown. I think that's would happen, but it doesn't. But it has no save. To quarter a creature's movement is absolutely crippling. Now, this effect, just Plant Growth by itself, is the thing that you're going to be casting over and over and over and over again. This is your go-to spell. This is the reason I would play an Archfey now. Forget the teleporting. Give me this. If I can get this and just be casting it, I don't know, 5 times a day at 5th level, that works for me. And I'm not suggesting that you cast it 5 times a day, but you could as a Warlock. If you are going first, the ability to drop Plant Growth on the enemy before they really move or can get anywhere, and to basically freeze them in place for the rest of the encounter will probably win you that encounter. It doesn't lock it up by any means, but it's devastating. So that by itself, devastating. Now let's look at the synergy. You have Eldritch Blast and you have Repelling Blast. So those poor creatures who are trying to get out of this area of effect, as soon as they get out of it, you can Repelling Blast them back into it. This isn't going to affect their ability to cast or shoot or use ranged attacks or anything to that effect, but it's going to restrict a lot more than you think it does. For example, it's a sphere. It's clearly stated that it is a sphere. Now, regardless of how you want to think that rule works, that's fine. But what it says is that it is a sphere and that anyone entering that area has their movement quartered. That means flight, etc., all that is affected within that area of that sphere. Now, I am fully aware there are going to be plenty of DMs that are not going to rule that way, but that's what the spell says. My love of this does not center on that particular point. I would certainly argue that point at the table if the DM were going to rule against it, but I would quickly drop it because it doesn't really matter all that much. If they fly, fine. Actually, it only helps me not feel so guilty about casting it. So things like flight or things that ignore difficult terrain, it isn't difficult terrain. So none of those effects work. So theoretically, flight and things that ignore difficult terrain are off the table, and it doesn't have concentration and it doesn't have a save. So I think that simply just using Plant Growth by itself is going to be plenty. But that isn't what makes the character the most powerful character in Dungeons and Dragons. It certainly is an upgrade from where I had it before when I did the first test drive on the Archfey. Look, the Archfey's ability to teleport around is fantastic. It's a great ability. It's wonderful. It's really, really, really strong. But I didn't understand that plant growth didn't require concentration, so it wasn't registering in the full scale of things. Because now, while you've got that out there, you could be running something like Hex or whatever you want in terms of concentration in tandem with an effect as great as that, as huge as that doesn't have a save, is crazy. Before we get to the second part of the combo, at this point, you pretty much are saying goodbye to the pseudo-dragon. You want the imp. It doesn't have to be the imp. It has to be, though, a creature that can turn invisible. So the imp or the sprite or the closet. Now, I think the imp is the best of those three, so I strongly urge you to take the imp. But the thing that I'm after most of all is that it is invisible when you roll initiative and you have alert. Going first, I cannot emphasize this enough, that going first or very, very early in the round is absolutely crucial, because you are going to be pulling off a spell combo by yourself. And the only way that that's going to be particularly meaningful is if you're going quickly in the round with plant growth, and then at the top of the round, in round 2, that's pretty close to being in round 1. But if you're talking about being in the end in both, you're giving the enemy way too many actions. So it's absolutely crucial, this more than any other character that I could name, that you want to be able to go as quickly as you possibly can into initiative. So having the imp roll with advantage that you can swap with is absolutely crucial. Because now we're going to get to the second part of the combo. And I've already done a short on this, so if you saw that short, you know what I'm going to say. In round 2, you cast Hunger of Hadar. Hunger of Hadar has a much, much, much smaller area of effect, but it's still a good size area of effect. And remember, they're not going anywhere because of plant growth. That's what makes this work. You do plant growth work first, you've nailed them down into place. They get their turn, more or less. That's all they're going to get, because the ones that matter are going to have Hunger of Hadar dropped on top of them. And Hunger of Hadar creates an area of darkness that actually blinds those that are within it with no save. And it does some damage at the beginning of the round without any save, and they get damage at the end of their round with a save. And that's something important to note, but it's not what really excites me here. It's the fact that it's an AoE blinding effect with no save is the most crucial thing. The damage is a bonus, and the other extra bonus for Hunger of Hadar is that anything within that is area of effect, it's difficult terrain. And the difficult terrain will stack with plant growth. This too, however, to me, is just simply a bonus, and it isn't quite as crippling as you may think. Because according to my reading of it, the difficult terrain means that you have to spend 2 feet of movement to move 1 foot. So that's an extra foot of movement you're having to spend. So if you just took that extra foot and just slapped it on top of what plant growth has, that would mean that you're spending 5 feet of movement for every 1 foot that you can actually move, all told between the two effects. It's definitely worse than just what plant growth is giving you, but it isn't like, quartering and halving and then, you get an eighth. It doesn't work like that as far as I read it. But the difference would be something like this, that if you were a character that had 30 feet of movement and you moved and dashed, that would give you 60 feet of movement. 60 feet divided by 5 gives you 12 feet of movement, which is only 2 squares. If it were quartered, it would be 15 feet of movement, and that's 3 squares. So it is definitely more crippling than plant growth alone, but it isn't, they aren't completely immobile, but they're more or less immobile. That's them taking their dash action, folks. We've already talked about flight. Now here's the other thing. Teleporting in round 1 is their big chance. to get out of jail is their big chance. But if you're talking about something like Misty Step, that's got 30 feet. There's going to be plenty of situations where they may not have 30 feet of movement to get, it may allow them to get 30 feet closer to an edge, but it's an enormous area of effect. So even that isn't such an automatic get out of jail free card as you might think. Now, once Hunger of Hadar drops, Misty Step is out because you have to see the area that you're going to teleport to with Misty Step. So ideally, this combo is best done in round 1 by 2 different characters, which is what the short was about. And a viewer had mentioned to me that the Archfey does get access to plant growth, and I was thinking about the 1-turn knockout blow. But when I started thinking about how initiative works and everything else, but I do owe that viewer that little prodding comment there, because I don't know that I would have done a test drive like this, because that comment definitely led me to be thinking about how initiative would work and that what's the difference between 1 round and the top of round 2. It's definitely not as good. There's escape clauses. In round 1, it's encounter over. If they both go off early, its encounter is over every single time. There's nothing the DM can really do about it. The other thing about things like plant growth, you can't dispel it because it doesn't have a duration. There is no ending the spell. The spell ends instantaneously. It just grows everything and that's it. Now, you could dispel Hunger of Hadar, those type of things, sure. Counterspell is going to be the big defense that you have to worry about. So what spell do you take other than Hunger of Hadar? That's right. You take Counterspell. Just to be that rude about it. So you could, in round 2, then drop Hunger of Hadar, and the DM says, no, Counterspell. And you go, nope, Counterspell your Counterspell. Now, you're not going to ever have the kind of spell slots to be able to get into a Counterspell war by doing the full combo. So in other words, you have 2 spell slots. Both of them are being used for the combo, right? So you won't have one available for Counterspell. But it will be available when you're just dropping Plant Growth, because that's the one that they're going to want to dispel. Plant Growth is the key. If they can get rid of Plant Growth, Hunger of Hadar is just Hunger of Hadar. It's good. It's not crippling. You can get out of it. Plant Growth, in combination with Hunger of Hadar, is encounter ending. Now, is it 100% every single encounter you're ever going to run into in Dungeons & Dragons? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the vast, vast, vast majority of encounters this is an encounter-ending combo if it goes off early. Now, there's a lot of ifs in this kind of a scenario, but this is incredibly repeatable, incredibly reliable. So I don't recommend that you do this over and over and over again, because I think you can see just how devastating this actually will be. Now, while you can do this by yourself, another Warlock in the party who has Hunger of Hadar obviously is going to be a big, big help. But that isn't always going to be the case, that you're going to have 2 Warlocks in one party. But one pretty popular class is Sorcerer, and a pretty popular option is Aberrant Mind, and they have access to Hunger of Hadar. So you might have round 1 options where you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself. But you may also want to still make that note. If you do have the Hunger of Hadar Sorcerer or Warlock that can cast Hunger of Hadar, anybody that can cast Hunger of Hadar, you have to have that disciplined sense of, do we really want to end everything on this encounter? Is it worth it? Because I'm telling you, you're only going to get so many cracks at this before the DM throws their hands up and bans something or just says, okay, I'm done with D&D. It's because there's something has to be done. And especially when you've got Counterspell in your back pocket to be able to deal with it as well. So this also, while I'm on that topic, there are a couple of magic items that I think I would definitely want to look at and I would prioritize above all else. One is Pearl of Power. Pearl of Power is going to give you a recovery of one of those slots. That will bring you to 6. So theoretically, at any given encounter, if you have 3 on average a day, you could pull off the combo. But that isn't entirely why. It's so that you also have the flexibility. If you were just to do the combo once a day, to do it is a big investment. That's both your spell slots that you've got to end that encounter. You're going to want to have something to be able to recover out of that encounter. That's why I would want that, or a Ring of Spell Storing. Now, Pearl of Power is an uncommon item, and I think it's pretty easy to get, and so I would really recommend that you look at that. And of course, Ring of Spell Storing, even though it's higher in rarity, it isn't an item that a lot of DMs have a lot of problems having you find if you were wanting to purchase one, or, giving away as treasure. So yeah, all that other stuff that you get with all the fun, all the role-playing options you're getting by having an intelligent familiar with Pact of the Chain, the fact that you now are using the imp. Oh, and at 5th level, of course, you get your invocations. Let's just finish this all out. So with your invocations, what should you grab? I would say I would grab whatever you didn't. I would definitely grab whatever you didn't grab between the Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast. And then you have sort of a choice here, because you could go with Investment of the Chainmaster. I don't see any real reason to take it, but you could. That way, if you did end up toggling to get to the pseudo-dragon, you're going to have that kind of an option with that kind of a DC, because you're not worried about giving it the attack roll because it's doing it independently, but it will get that DC and you'll be able to protect it with your reaction. So that's definitely something to think about. But it could be something for utility. You're going to be very mobile, so you don't need anything that's going to deal with mobility for invocations, but something like Mask of Many Faces. That's a wonderful invocation that's going to give you enormous utility. You've got combat covered now. You've got it covered. You don't need anything that's going to help you in combat, really. So I would definitely want to take something in the realm of Mask of Many Faces. So let's just talk a little bit about Hunger of Hadar, and then we'll be done. Hunger of Hadar provides darkness, and those that are in it have the blinded condition. But if you have dark vision, you see into it. It isn't like the darkness spell, where you have to have something like Devil Sight to see into it. So if you have dark vision, you can see just fine into it. And now let's talk about how devastating you are being an elf with dark vision and having a repelling blast. In a scenario like this, where they are dealing with plant growth, and they're dealing with difficult terrain on top of the plant growth, and they're blind, and they're getting cold and acid and everything for that round, and they can't get out of this because they're taking their dash action and they're only going 2 squares. And by the time they finally get out of that area of effect, attack that area of effect, you're repelling them, blasting back in, or maybe you're doing it before they even get to the edge, just to be mean. And because you don't need to get them generally, the maximum amount of distance in because of how hindered they are, you could handle, at this point, you get 2 Eldritch Blasts at 5th level. You could be, handing one to the other. And because they're blinded, you're going to have advantage on hitting both of them. So you're very likely to hit both of them. So, you're knocking them both back 10 feet. So it's just an incredibly cruel character. It's just, there's no hope. There's no hope. And I don't know what the DM is supposed to do. And I don't know how long this will be fun for. But it sure is fun to think about. And it is a fun character to play, regardless of how often you pull the combo off. But I'm going to ask you, for your own sake and for the sake of your fellow players and for the sanity of your DM, to show some restraint and only do it every now and again. All right. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.